Wildlife Refuge. Oh, got the recording part. Hobbitstee was founded by myself actually in 2000 and what was it? 7, I believe. And so we've been in business for about 15 years. Started out rehabilitating maybe 30 animals a year, and then quickly grew to the 3,000 plus that we do take care of currently. And so we just moved to a larger property as of December of last year. And we are now waiting to get all the paperwork in order to start building our brand new state-of-the-art wildlife hospital. So that's kind of where we're at. So we went from a 1-acre property to a 47-acre property. So we're really fortunate to have this much space. And today I'm going to talk about wildlife rescue when wild animals need a helping hand. One more thing quickly. So at Hobbitstee, we rehabilitate all species. So we're not a species-specific wildlife rescue, like there is quite a few of those. We rehabilitate all species with the exception of bears. The Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry would not license us for bears because they're not considered native to this part of the province. Now, with a lot of the ongoings, they might have to revise that soon. Oh, why won't my... Oh, there we go. So why are we having this talk and why is this important to me? We can, by getting people educated on what to do when wildlife is in distress, we can reduce the suffering, and we can most certainly decrease the number of orphaned, and that orphaned is very much in quotation mark, wildlife. We can increase the survival rate of sick and injured wildlife. And all of you who are here today can help us establish a network of people who can help wildlife when they need a hand. I don't ever do a presentation where I don't include at least a couple of slides about this. So anthropomorphism is basically means attributing human thoughts and feelings to animals, thoughts and feelings that we actually as humans have no idea whether they have them. Particularly with the advent of social media, there's been a huge increase in inappropriate videos and pictures, and lots of them being shared and liked. The most recent one I think I saw was a little beaver kit around Christmas time. That one was floating around, that was in somebody's home, and he was trying to use plush dog toys to build a dam with. I realize how cute that looks, but when you look at it from a wildlife angle, there is so many things wrong with it. So if you look at the one picture, fawn and dog, so the fawn is already dead, he just doesn't know it yet. Obviously, a dog and a fawn should never interact with one another. Fawns imprint on anything that they are around actually quite quickly. I actually found that fawns are imprinted on humans half an hour being in somebody's home. So this fawn is now imprinted on a dog. So now the fawn goes out into the great outdoors and it's going to randomly approach dogs and animals that look like dogs, like coyotes who eat fawns. So nothing good can come of this. I chose the picture of the gentleman kissing this raccoon. First off, that raccoon looks like he's 2 seconds away from ripping this person's face off. He looks pretty angry. But also raccoons can carry all sorts of zoonotic diseases, so diseases that can be transferred to humans. There's actually a couple that they happily carry that don't affect them, so they're the definitive host for raccoon roundworm, for example. So the raccoon roundworm doesn't affect them at all. If we as human or another mammal contracts raccoon roundworm, it migrates to our brain and makes Swiss cheese out of our brain. And we find that here in North America, 30% of the raccoons carry this roundworm. So kissing raccoons, never a good idea. I also abhor people taking selfies with wildlife, or even sometimes I see scientists taking selfies with wildlife. To me, that is never a good idea. So I would never recommend doing that. So if we don't share like or comment on these inappropriate social media posts, then perhaps the people that are creating them will stop making them. And, we can stop this not so good movement. Things to keep in mind when you work with wildlife or are dealing with wildlife in distress. Every single wild animal that you can think of has a weapon. That means that they have something that they can, some body part they can utilize to harm you with. So when you're working with wildlife, you have to make sure that you don't put your life at risk. So that can be them hurting you, that can be, contracting a disease that they can transmit to you. But it's also as simple, if there's a turtle on the road and you would like to help the turtle cross, make sure that you're not going to get run over by a car, or that you're not going to be the cause of causing an accident. So you see in the bottom left, that's a bald eagle foot and talons. The bald eagles have tremendous power in their feet and their talons. So all birds of prey, their weapons are their talons. Bald eagle has enough strength in that foot to crush your arm, the bones in your arm. And then when those talons penetrate your arm, it's pretty much impossible for it not to nick an artery. So that kind of thing can quite easily kill you. You'd need orthopedic surgery at least. That would be like getting away good. The other picture, that's actually an alligator snapping turtle, not a common snapping turtle like we have in Canada. So, but the idea is the same. They obviously snap, bite. They also have very sharp nails that they can scratch you with. The next picture is a beaver. Obviously beaver have teeth, but beaver also have nails and a really, really strong tail that they can beat you up with. The top one is a bat, a rather innocuous little animal. Yes, they can bite you, but that doesn't really hurt. However, bats have an insane capability of randomly flying around with viruses that don't really affect them. They are like, I guess that's their superpower, is their viral carrying capacity. So there's groups of bats in South America, or excuse me, in Africa, that happily fly around with Ebola. If we as mammals contract Ebola, it's a pretty serious death sentence, but the bats are very little to not affected by it. So that's why there's so much research going on about viruses in bats, because they just have this crazy ability to fly around with viruses without them affecting it. A lot of those viruses, including rabies, are zoonotic, so people can get those. That brings us to the little rabies talk that we have to have. So up until a few years ago, we were pretty sure that there was no terrestrial rabies in our province. We've always had aerial rabies in the form of bats. They pretty much got rid of the terrestrial rabies in the 90s by baiting. They spread a vaccine that was very, very tasty. And a lot of those terrestrial rabies vector species like skunks and raccoons really like it. So they inoculated themselves for rabies, and that's kind of how they got rid of it. But an incident in Hamilton a few years ago brought to the forefront that we had rabies again. So we're having to live with that right for the moment. So all mammals can contract rabies. The only semi-exception would be opossums. Opossums have a lower than average body temperature in the mammal world. And so the rabies virus needs that good, mammal body temperature to survive. So that's why opossums there has been cases of opossums getting it, but those cases were of an opossum having a fever and therefore increased body temperature, and that's how they ended up still getting rabies. If you are symptomatic with rabies, you will die. They actually put you in a medically induced coma because it is so horrifically painful, and they basically wait for you to die. Rabies is transmitted through saliva, which is most often a bite, but never ever underestimate a paper cut and a drop of saliva, because it will still give you rabies as well. So a lot of people think, oh, I didn't get bitten, I'm good. Not necessarily the case. So in Ontario, species that we consider rabies vector species are raccoons, skunks, foxes, and bats. The reason they are rabies vector species is because they have a strain of rabies named after them. So there's raccoon strain rabies, skunk strain rabies, and so on. But all those strains are interchangeable. So skunks can get raccoon strain, and bats can get fox strain, etc., etc. So we had a raccoon come in that turned out to be rabies positive, that was still alive. So this is a video of this raccoon. Oh, let me see if I can go back there now. Yeah, there we go. So that raccoon was brought out. It was actually brought out by my neighbor. It attacked his dog. So one of the things that happens with rabies in the early stages when it's symptomatic, because it is transmitted through saliva, the virus alters the brain in such a way that you want to bite everything. So that's why this raccoon is biting the stainless steel enclosure. And I left her alone for 15 minutes. And when I came back, she had in fact chewed off both her front legs, which I will not show. And obviously we, at that point, euthanized her, and she turned out to be positive for both canine distemper and rabies. And so, yeah, that was definitely not a good thing. The other disease that I want to highlight is highly pathogenic avian influenza. It's a really big deal, and it's becoming a bigger deal. So it was a really big deal this year. It's going to be a really big deal again last year. Right now, it has left to a certain degree our area, but it's gone with the birds that have migrated and is currently creating havoc all over other parts of the world. And as soon it will be back in full force. So here's a short video of an eagle that is actually suffering from avian influenza. So I'll show you this video and then we'll talk about it a little bit more. You can see he can't actually hold his head up. This is me standing next to him, so normally he would be attacking me, but he can't hold his head up, and he has very little to no control over his head. So the symptoms in this particular case were very neurological. I quickly took this video because this was our first case of avian influenza, and I sent this video to our veterinarian and asked her opinion. We opted to euthanize this eagle right away and send him for testing, and he did test positive for avian influenza. So since then, I'm sorry and sad to say that I've seen many more cases. We actually have imported our own rapid tests because they are not available here in North America, so we've imported them. And so we actually use rapid tests very similar to what you would have used for COVID to rapid test all risk species or suspected animals on arrival. So that we can make good euthanasia decisions. In most species of birds, avian influenza is this particular strain of avian influenza, 95% lethal. And we are under very strict orders from both Canadian Wildlife Services and the MNRF to euthanize all symptomatic birds on arrival. So the symptoms that we would look for is slow, lethargic, neurological issues, discharge from the eyes and nose, and animals that are not obviously injured otherwise. So neurological symptoms, of course, could be caused by a traumatic injury, but if they're not, there's no obvious injury, then we have to suspect avian influenza. Obviously, we now rapid test them, and then we euthanize accordingly. So high-risk species would be geese, ducks, swans, seabirds, eagles, vultures, and scavenging mammals. Unfortunately, I think we're up to about 16 species of mammals that have now been diagnosed with avian influenza. Ourselves, we've had foxes raccoons and skunks test positive, aside from birds. But there's also been various types of seals, sea lions. I think there was orcas that tested positive. Avian influenza is also very, very rapidly wiping out whole breeding colonies of seabirds on those in amazing locations like Bass Rock and nesting colonies in the Arctic. So it is a really big deal. The most scary one is that there was an outbreak of avian influenza in a mink farm in Spain, and scientists are actually suspecting that it spread so fast because there was mink to mink, so mammal to mammal transmission. So that brings it one step closer to being an issue for humans. Humans can get it, but it's been isolated cases so far. If there is mammal to mammal transmission options, that would be very serious. It is so serious that the World Health Organization right now has put very serious measures in place to monitor, anything going on in mammals, because it is becoming a human health concern. So how can we prevent spreading? Is backyard chickens and ducks are definitely a big issue. Keep them contained. We have chickens as well, and normally our chickens are allowed to roam. Since the avian influenza issue, our chickens have been confined to their chicken coop, and we make them a little outdoor fenced in area that they cannot get out of. If you're a walker or hiker, particularly if you do it waterfront, disinfect your shoes. So, but also if you do have your ducks and chickens, have a special set of shoes that you use for your ducks and chickens. But then when you go to the grocery store, you put on a different pairs of shoes, because if my neighbor, the chicken farmer, happens to also be grocery shopping, you can transmit avian influenza to his shoes. If avian influenza happens in a poultry farm, CFIA rules, every single animal on the farm has to be euthanized, so thousands and thousands of chickens, and then those barns have to be disinfected and sit empty for X number of months. So that's never good. If you do have to deal with wild birds, make sure that you're wearing gloves and mask. If you see a number of sick and or dead birds, particularly in the risk category that I mentioned above, geese, ducks, swans, contact the Canadian Wildlife Health Cooperative, and I've listed the website there on how to contact them. But if you just Google Canadian Wildlife Health Cooperative, their information will come up. Okay, any questions in regards to the diseases?
We did have 2 questions in the chat, so both are from Stefan. So he was wondering about advising how to deal with bats in homes, if you have any pointers there, which is going back a little ways, but
yeah, so bats in homes. So if you have a bat, you probably have a colony of bats. It is illegal to evict bats during their hibernation months, which is now. So you can't evict bats now. You can also not evict bats early spring. Generally, they're quite non-obtrusive, but I do understand that, at some point they should be evicted. We do recommend that people put up a bat house so that when bats are evicted. So I think it's generally around June is when you can start evicting bats. Your best bet is to hire a reputable wildlife removal company, because they have to bat-proof your house, because there's tiny little cracks that bats can fit through, but also the cleanup after should be done by professionals, because bat guano, so bat poop, can contain a whole bunch of diseases that humans can get. So you want to make sure that that's done by professionals. You basically can sit outside at dusk and watch them exit your home. And then what the wildlife removal companies do is they put one-way doors in so that all the bats get a chance to leave. And then once all the bats are out, they will close it all up. Your bats will now be gone. And what was the second question?
And also, so with HPAI, is there any risk if one was hiking in the forest to be aware of?
Yeah, just stay away from birds and clean your shoes. Stay away from birds in as much as if there's, unusually behaving birds. The key is if you approach a bird, a flighted bird, and it does not fly away from you, there's a problem. and then the bird is going to need help. It's, if you can catch a bird that is not, that it doesn't fly away, then you know the bird needs help, because any sane thinking wild bird will fly away, and if they can't, then there is definitely a problem. But yeah, hiking in the woods, less risk than hiking waterfront, because of course it is waterfowl. But I'm very, very sad to say we've seen a very, very large number of eagles, vultures, and hawks with avian influenza as well. And so they would be more inclined to hang out in a forested area.
Perfect. Thank you, Chantal. That's all we've got so far.
No problem. All right, then we head on over to mammal orphans. With all this unseasonably warm weather we've been having, I'm kind of cringing a little bit, because I have a feeling we're going to get some really, really early wildlife babies. And every year we get so many calls from people because they are concerned that certain babies are orphaned. So here are some criteria that you can apply for determining whether these babies are truly orphaned. Sometimes the parenting style of wildlife doesn't jive with what we humans think they should do, as in certain wildlife parents will leave babies for extended periods of time. So here's some guides to give you an idea. I will touch on fawns later. That's a whole topic on its own. So incessant crying for extended periods of time. When I say extended period of time, I mean like a whole overnight. Baby raccoons are really demanding, and when they get a little bit older, mom raccoon will think nothing of sleeping 5 trees over while she leaves her babies alone, just to get some rest, and she will let the babies cry. So we're definitely talking like a whole night. Anytime an eyes closed baby or naked baby crawls out of a nest, it's going to need assistance. They do that only when they are not being cared for, not being fed. Unfortunately, this happens a lot to baby squirrels, and of course squirrels have their babies up high up in trees in these little leaf nests. So when these little blind guys crawl out of the nest, they have a habit of falling to the ground. And the problem with that is that they are fairly head heavy, so they tend to fall on their face. So anytime you see baby squirrels on the ground while wearing gloves and a mask, check their little faces. Make sure that they don't have bloody faces, because they break their jaws and their teeth and all sorts of nastiness. The little squirrel in the picture is an excellent example of what a dehydrated animal looks like. I don't think you can get much more dehydrated than that. Low body temperature and being cold to the touch. Again, make sure you're wearing gloves. Anytime there is, so all wildlife have fleas and ticks and lice and mites, that's normal. But when they are absolutely crawling with it, that's never a good thing. If the eyes are sunken and if they're lethargic. Somebody has their hand up. What can I do for you? Okay, we'll move on. So when you're looking at baby wildlife, again, every year we end up with a whole bunch of orphaned cottontails and not so orphaned cottontails. So you need to know what is normal for the species. So unlike domestic rabbits, cottontails have babies every 28 days throughout the spring, summer, and fall. So mom takes care of them for 3 weeks, and then she leaves them to their own devices. So the little lad below with the like the little fuzzball below with the ears up and the eyes open, that cottontail fits in the palm of my hand, but it's fully capable of taking care of itself. That is the age they are fully independent. The little one above, that's it's got very little fur and its eyes are still closed and its ears are tucked back and are still closed. That little one is too young to be on its own. However, that being said, in the case of cottontails, mom actually only visits them once a night for about 5 minutes. She lays over top of the nest, and the little ones, they crawl from below. They find a nipple, they nurse, and then mom leaves, and she leaves them well hidden. They don't dig elaborate nests. They just make a divot in the lawn, have the babies there, kind of line it with their fur, and make it as invisible as possible. If you do find what you think is an animal that is absolutely, or a baby that is orphaned, warmth is the most important thing. Nothing that you can come up with is going to be good for them to feed, other than perhaps Pedialyte if they're willing to take it. Make sure to be very, very cautious with that so that they don't aspirate, because aspiration pneumonia is very difficult to deal with, and it's even more difficult to cure. If you don't know what to do, don't try, find out, call a reputable place. A pet store is not a reputable place. They're going to try and sell you kitten or puppy milk replacer, which is not good for wildlife. It's only good for kittens and puppies. Google is not a great resource because if I can think of the most crazy thing in my head, let's say aliens have landed and have set up shop in the Arctic, I will be able to find a website to corroborate that. So because you generally do a Google search with a preconceived idea, you don't necessarily get the right answer. On top of that, the first couple of pages on Google might not be right. You don't need credentials to write stuff on Google. So there's a whole bunch of really strange, weird stuff on Google. At one point, a few years ago, there was a website that recommended if you found a baby deer, an orphan baby deer, to feed them cow's milk mixed with bananas. And I can 100% guarantee you that is lethal. Make sure that if you are monitoring babies, that you are not the cause of the parents not returning. I cannot tell you how many times I have gone to retrieve, rescue, particularly fawns and things like that, where mom's just waiting, in the tree line for me to go away so that they can get. I remember lifting one out of a window well, and the minute I lifted that fawn out, it let out a big scream, and I saw movement, and my mom was in the tree line waiting for me to go away. The minute I did, I stepped back, mom came up, retrieved her baby, licked it, and ran off with it. Don't feed them. Make sure you don't feed them, and whatever you do, please don't feed them. There's my fawns. If you see a fawn, and it's laying curled up like the little one on the left, or it's standing, or it's walking, leave it alone. Deer only visit their babies during darkness hours. So when fawns are born, mom hides them. So people always say they're born scentless. They're not necessarily born scentless, but they take on the scent of the environment. So fawn laying in the grass smells like grass. And that makes them hard to find for predators. They can lay really flat and really still. I didn't include it here, but I have a video of 30 fawns in our fawn pen, in our fawn pasture, and they're all laying down in the tall grass, and you don't see a single one, except I'm walking up with the bottle racks for them to feed, and suddenly they all stand up, and then suddenly there's 30 fawns. And so I cannot tell you how many times I've had to go look for fawns in our fawn pen where I know they're there, and I still have a really hard time finding them. So when they lay flat, they're really hard to find. If you do happen to see one, enjoy the moment and move on. Because what happens when people try to take care of fawns that are or are not necessarily orphaned is what you see in the picture on the right. That was a person whose dog brought home a baby deer. And as she was dealing with the baby deer, the dog went out and grabbed a second baby deer. So she ended up with a set of twins. And she decided to go to the grocery store because she had read that it was a really good idea to feed these fawns goat's milk. And she bought homogenized pasteurized goat's milk and a little puppy bottle, and proceeded to feed them little puppy bottles full of goat's milk. And then 2 weeks later, one of the fawns was dying and the other was not doing well. And for some strange reason, she took the one that was dying back out to the bush and left it there, and then called me for the second one. So I made her go get the first one too, which I euthanized on arrival. And the second one was the better of the two. So you can see how the ears are all droopy. And I mean, the animal is skin over bone. Eyes are, it's emaciated. Its eyes are, all dull. I nursed this one through, and unfortunately, it was one of those cases where too much organ damage was done by dehydration, because, we as humans, we have all these measures at our disposal that we can utilize, which I used, and but the kidneys were just not functioning as well as they should, and the fawn was always a poor doer and ended up needing to be euthanized later on anyways. So there's only a grand total of 4 rehabilitation facilities that will accept fawns in during the season. and that have licenses to rehabilitate fawns. We do the most, and we have room for maybe 35 fawns a year. And that means that we really, really reserve our spaces for fawns that are obviously sick, injured, or literally laying right next to their dead mother. If that is not the case, if they're not obviously bleeding, please don't remove the fawn from the wild. If you are unsure, call. We can look at pictures or video, and then we can, from that, determine whether or not those fawns need help. We work very closely with a large number of SPCAs and humane societies, and when they are called in, they will consult with me. And so we're making informed as possible decisions at that point. Please, please, please leave these little guys be. Okay, before we get into opossums, is there any questions?
Nothing right now, but the deer were very cute, but I like the wild, but
yeah,
nothing yet. But thank you, Chantal.
We always say, see a fawn, enjoy, and move on. So opossums are a super cool species of animals. So their lifespan is actually really short. They live to be maybe 4 or 5 years old. They are immune to most snake venom, which is really makes them kind of special. They also have the most teeth of any North American mammal, which they use to, crunch up roadside roadkill, bone and all. They have 4 thumbs on opposable thumbs on all 4 feet, and they have a prehensile tail. And of course, they are North America's only marsupial. So they have a pouch, as you see in the picture, and they have little babies in their pouch. Weirdly enough, they have like most marsupials, I guess, but because we're not so used to them here, they have an 8-day gestation, and after 8 days, they give birth to like 30 plus babies. But there's only like room for 16 in the pouch, so first come, first serve, and the rest don't make it. But one of the big things that we do in the summer, we literally raise hundreds and hundreds of baby opossums. And that is when moms get hit and killed by a car, the babies in that pouch are quite well cushioned by the organs, and most of the time they survive it. So if you do, during the summer months, see an opossum that is recently deceased by the side of the road, it pays to stop and, turn her over and make sure that there's not babies needing help in those pouches. So I have some videos here. So that's what it looks like. These are just starting to grow some fur. People always ask me what it looks like, babies in the pouch. And then here's another video. These are a little bit bigger. So they're pretty cute. Oh, I doubled up on that. We'll skip past that. Baby birds. Again, we get a lot of calls for baby birds. The old wives' tale that if you touch a baby bird, the parents will reject it is one of those old wives' tales that refuses to die. The sense of smell on birds is actually quite limited. So they don't necessarily smell that you've touched their babies. Also, like most wildlife parents, they basically just want their babies back. If a human baby got abducted by wolves, and we found that baby again, as humans, we would just want it back regardless of whether or not it smelled like wolves. So we have to keep that in mind. That doesn't mean go handle baby wildlife willy-nilly. Please don't do that. But if we need to help, then we can. And in the case of baby birds, we have to look at birds and think they don't have any body parts that actually helps them being able to move their baby. They can't pick up their own babies and fly them back to the nest. So if baby birds do fall out of the nest, they're going to need human help. I suggest you put gloves on and put a mask on, and that is for your own safety, but it's got nothing to do with you transferring your scent to the baby bird. Now, if it's not just the baby that falls out of the nest, but the whole nest falls down, or if the baby bird that's fallen out of a nest that you simply cannot reach, As long as you make them a little nest like you see in the one picture to the left, using an old margarine container with some holes in it or a basket or something like that, place the baby in it and place it as close to the original nest site as you can. The parents will continue to feed them. So what drives mother or parent birds to feed their babies is the sound they make. So we utilize that sometimes because any robin will feed any baby robin within its territory because they sound like a baby robin. So as long as it's the right species of birds, they are essentially interchangeable for most species. So as long as they're within the range of the parents and they can hear them, they will continue to take care of them. Now, if there's fledglings, so the second picture from the left, that would be a fledgling. This was taken before avian influenza was a big deal, so I am not wearing gloves in that picture, which I really should be. That's a fledgling baby. So if it's fully feathered, but still has a little bit of fluff, it's a fledgling, and it's just left the nest and is learning to fly. It takes them a couple of days to be fully flighted, and during that time the parents do continue to take care of them. So please don't abduct these guys. Again, we end up with a lot of abducted fledglings every year. Our resources are better spent taking care of animals that truly need our help. Birds are complicated. Those are just a few of the different diets that birds can eat. The problem is with altricial birds. So altricial baby birds are essentially songbirds and birds of prey. If you think precocious babies would be like ducklings, they crawl out of the nest or out of the egg, and they spend half an hour kind of drying up, and they get all fluffy, and then they're able to run around. So those would be precocious babies. Altricial babies are babies like human babies that need actual parents to take care of them. Altricial baby birds eat every half hour, and so however much I say don't feed the baby wildlife that you get in your hands, sometimes you can't get baby birds to where they need to go fast enough. And then a good substitute food would be just a hard-boiled egg. If you have a couple of leaves of spinach through the food processor, so that it's all crumbly and mixed together, and then you just very gently using the flat end of a skewer or something of that nature, and put little bits in the mouth, and the baby birds will open their mouth wide open when they're hungry and call. And then you put little bits of food in their mouth. But the key is they have to be fully hydrated. If they are dehydrated, don't feed them because it's not good for them. The other thing that happens a lot is I don't even know where people find eyedroppers anymore, because I keep hearing people tell me, I used an eyedropper to give the bird water. Please don't do that. So the trachea is really close to the front of the mouth, as seen in this picture. And unless they know that there's going to be fluid in their mouth, they won't close that. And so the chances of them aspirating fluids are really, really great. And I cannot tell you how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of birds we've had in with aspiration pneumonia. Birds have very complicated respiratory system, and it's not, the outcome generally isn't good. If you do call us about a bird, I am even if you can't tell me the exact species of the bird, that's okay. But we got to narrow it down a little bit. So the amount of phone conversations I've had, well, I found a bird in my backyard and it needs help. Okay, do you have any idea what kind of bird it is? No idea. All right, is it a songbird? Is it a waterfowl? Is it a wading bird? Is it a bird of prey? The advice I'm going to give you for a mourning dove is going to be very different than the advice I'm going to give you for a bald eagle. So here are some ways that you can determine that. If it's very little, and it's a bird that you see at the bird feeder, it's going to be a songbird. If it's got talons, it's going to be a bird of prey. Even our tiny little saw-whet owl, which is top row, second from the right, that's a little owl that as an adult is about quite a bit smaller than my hand, actually. They're quite small, but it's still a bird of prey. If it's got webbed feet, it's going to be waterfowl. If it's got long legs, it's going to be a wading bird. So those are some pretty cool criteria. Interestingly enough, I put the baby mourning dove, which is the second from the left, and the baby turkey vulture, which is the fluffy white one, beside it, side by each, because somehow people confuse the two. So to pick up the baby turkey vulture that you see there, the cotton white fluff ball, I need like 2 hands and then some, because they are about the size of a chicken. And then the little baby mourning dove to the side there can quite comfortably have a nap in the palm of my hand. But for some reason, people confuse the two. So turkey vulture, white like a cotton ball, and baby mourning dove, a lot more gray and a lot smaller. All right, any questions?
Yes, we have 2 more from Stefan, and I'm gonna apologize if I'm not getting the first one clearly, but if someone observes a nest in a tree in the yard, should you just let it be, or should you first see what's going on with the nest? So I guess if you see a nest, like, do you want to make sure that that's being occupied, and like, is there
No, just leave it alone.
just leave it always? Okay.
Yeah.
And then the next question is, how helpful is it to scatter bird seed around bird feeders, and are they worth maintaining a bird feeder to help wildlife?
So bird feeders never scatter bird seed. Bird seed should always be in bird feeders because it gets yucky and wet below, and then it grows, you know, much like us getting food poisoning, similar to birds. So bird feeders are strictly for human entertainment. In no way, shape, or form do they assist wildlife. Essentially, well, I shouldn't say that because they might help your squirrels along a little bit, but not birds. Birds will enjoy bird food and bird feeders, and it makes it so that you can have a good look at them. But there is plentiful food, and they don't, the birds that come to bird feeders don't need bird feeders. So yes, bird feeders are fine if they're well maintained and regularly cleaned, but it's not something that actually helps them. It's strictly for our own entertainment.
Perfect, thank you. That's all we got so far.
All righty, on we go. So this happens again, the picture to the right, this was pre-avian influenza. It's when we could still handle birds without gloves. We can't do that anymore. So birds of prey are kind of interesting. Like I've mentioned before, their talons are their main weapon. And so most people are worried about the beak part. Unless you are holding anyone in the falcon family or a turkey vulture, they're generally not going to bite you. So what happens with birds of prey is when you corner them and they can't get away from you, they will do what that bird does in the left picture. They will roll on their back and put their feet up, because now their main weapons are freed up to nail you. And so if you need to contain a bird like that, an injured red-tailed hawk or something of that nature, if you take a towel and throw it over their head, now the bird can't see. And that makes that they can't aim those weapons, and that gives you a chance to actually grab a hold of the weapons. And so as you can see in the picture to the right, I very conveniently have those talons tucked in my hand and the wings gently tucked in, and that bird is perfectly comfortable. Another way of doing that, make sure, by the way, if you are holding a bird of prey like I am holding that bird of prey there, that it is far enough away from your face so that you can't get bitten in your face, because it will hurt. But the other way of doing it is just taking a Rubbermaid tote or something like that, throwing a towel over the bird, putting the Rubbermaid tote gently over top, and kind of maneuvering the bird into the tote that way, and then put the lid on, make sure there's some holes in the lid so the bird can breathe. Never, ever, ever, ever put a bird of prey or otherwise, in a dog crate or a cat carrier or something like that. The bars in those carriers are just spaced nicely enough for birds to get their wings caught in, and then they turn around. So if they didn't have broken wings going into it, they almost always, most definitely will have them coming out of it. So a cardboard box, or like I said, a Rubbermaid tote is your friend when it comes to transporting birds. Wild fostering and reuniting, I do a lot of this because no matter how hard we try as humans, we are lousy substitutes for species appropriate parents. And so if wildlife babies have been mistakenly taken, they can be returned, because much like humans, they just, parents just want their babies back. Just always think of that. If the parents are available, they will come and get their babies back. And so many bird species, Canada geese are awesome for fostering goslings on, and it's, you actually need two people. You need one person to make the parents angry so that they're looking at you, and then you need another person to quickly sneak in the goslings along with the parents. And then when the person who's making the parents angry steps away, the parents will swim off in a huff, and because they don't know how to count, they don't know that they now have spare babies. So that works really well. We utilize that a lot. We also do it with birds of prey. Birds of prey will quite readily foster others of their own kind. We do it in songbirds. And raccoons are insanely protective moms. If you stand and you're holding a crying baby raccoon and there's an actual mom, not its mom, but a mom raccoon in the area, she will run up, climb up your leg, grab the baby, bite you, and run away with it and take it away from you. They are awesome moms. There are some exceptions. Ducks, for example, mallard ducks, they do not allow babies to be fostered on them. They will kill them. Interestingly, if you think about it, geese is a two-parent household. Mallard ducks, the females are the ones that take care of the little ones. So I think that might have something to do with it. But as a rule, if done the right way, a lot of babies can be fostered. If not fostered, they can most certainly be returned. Oh, hello. My cat Bob would like to say hello to everyone. But we have to make sure that the babies that we are either reuniting or fostering are not human habituated or imprinted. Like I just mentioned, a fawn, it takes fawn less than half an hour in possession of humans to become imprinted on humans. And they basically don't know that they're deer, and they wouldn't know to go with mama deer. Same goes for goslings. Goslings as birds, they imprint really, really quickly. And so we need to have as little to do with them as possible. We manage that in a rehabilitation type setting quite nicely because we always have them in plural. So we house them together so that they can learn from each other and they can look at each other and they know that they are geese, fawns, or whatever the species is. Okay, any questions about baby wildlife?
Nothing right now, no.
All righty, then we go into turtles. If you see a turtle on the road, which usually happens, we kind of have 3 times a year. So May, the males kind of start crossing the roads, and some females going from wintering grounds to summering grounds. And then June, the females start crossing roads to lay eggs. And then in the fall, again, depending on the weather, everybody crosses the roads again to go back from the summering grounds to the wintering grounds. So there's these 3 times. June is by far the time where we see the most hit by car turtles, and it's the most damaging to the various turtle populations because they are almost all breeding females, and it takes turtles a long time to be old enough to reproduce. In the case of snapping turtles, we're talking like 15 odd years before they're old enough to reproduce. And okay, Bob, don't step on my computer. And so, it's a huge loss to the population when these breeding females get killed. All 8 species of turtles in Ontario are on the endangered species list. Some are just listed at risk, but others are actually listed endangered. So it is a big deal. When you are assisting a turtle, as I've mentioned before, make sure that you are not causing a traffic hazard. Not only are you legally liable, you are also morally liable for causing an accident. During the months of May and July, we very actively collect deceased turtles. And we work with about 20 SPCAs and humane societies that send us the wildlife that they pick up. And we have all of them partnering with us, and they help us collect those turtle cadavers. And we recover every year around 2,000 eggs. And those eggs we hatch in incubators, and the resulting hatchlings we return to within a 1 kilometer suitable habitat to within a 1 kilometer location of where the mum was found, in an effort to kind of reduce that genetic loss of that breeding female getting killed. If you do find an injured turtle, contain it. Again, Rubbermaid tote your friend. But when you are transporting a turtle, make sure you don't have water in the container, because if a turtle is not able to lift its head out of the water, there's a good chance it will drown. And then we get to the age-old question of how to pick up a snapping turtle. This is how you pick up a snapping turtle. You lift it off the ground like a tray of drinks and use your other hand to support its tail. Never ever pick a turtle up by its tail, because that can cause spinal damage. As much as you wouldn't pick up your dog by its tail, you don't pick up a turtle by its tail. And that's, if you do have to pick one up, that's how you pick this up. This was actually a turtle from the St. Catharines area. This turtle had swallowed the fish hook. Very appreciative to the fisherman who contained the turtle and contacted the Lincoln County Humane Society, who transferred the turtle to us. Under anesthesia, we were able to remove the hook, and a couple of weeks on antibiotics, and we were able to release this turtle back to the wild. So that was pretty snazzy. I am yelling at my husband here because this was a 35 kilogram turtle that I was holding, and I was like, quick, take the picture because it's heavy. So you do have to be aware of that. These guys do weigh a lot. So here we have some more fish hook turtles. We beg fishermen, if you hook a turtle, please don't just cut your line and send them on their way, because the turtle that you see in the right upper hand corner was seen sitting on the banks of the Grand River, not moving. And I was expecting a upper respiratory infection of sorts, but on x-ray we saw a fish hook that was sitting right at the base of the esophagus. It had taken this turtle 2 years to get as emaciated as he is there, because he was not able to swallow food. So it actually took him a year to gain enough weight to be, which we did. We put a surgical feeding tube in to bypass that fish hook. So after a year, he finally had gained enough weight so that surgery could be performed, and the fish hook was removed, and then he needed another year to recover. So you can see the difference. Recently swallowed hook was easily removed, no problem, couple of weeks, good to go, and then 2 years recovery for the other ones. Snakes are also very deserving of assistance. Many species of our 17 species of snakes in Ontario are listed on the endangered species list as well. Some of them are listed on the endangered species list simply because people keep hitting them over the head with a shovel. Yes, habitat loss, habitat fragmentation is a huge part, but the biggest reason is people keep hitting them over the head with a shovel. So can we please stop hitting snakes over the head with a shovel? Out of those 17 species, only one is actually venomous. So that would be a Massasauga rattlesnake. The Massasauga rattlesnake only occurs in very specific locations in Ontario. The biggest population is the Bruce Peninsula. And then down here in the Wainfleet area, we have a very small population. And then down Point Pelee, there's a very small population. Just, if you see a snake that looks like a Massasauga rattlesnake, leave it alone. Make sure that your fear doesn't influence young people. There are so many people fearful of snakes. I don't know why there are so many people fearful of snakes. I don't quite understand it, but people aren't born afraid of snakes. They are being made afraid of snakes. So, a healthy dose of respect, like we would have for approaching a coyote, should go similarly for snakes, but people don't need to be fearful of snakes. If you do need to contain an injured snake, and yes, if a snake is injured, it does deserve medical care because they hurt the same like any other animal. A cloth bag that you can tie a knot in the top is the best way to contain them. If a snake is in harm's way, and you're not afraid of snakes and you know how to, please move the snake out of harm's way. Interesting story, when I just became a wildlife custodian, there's all these rules and regulations related to wildlife and being a wildlife custodian. And my first year, I got a phone call from a farmer who was moving a wood pile, and he had found a couple of snakes in the wood pile. He was very, very afraid of snakes. And he called me and he says, you either come get these snakes or I'm going to kill them all. So I went over there and moved his wood pile for him. He got all that free labor out of me. I found 27 milk snakes in his wood pile. Milk snakes are an endangered species, and I contained them all, and I didn't know what to do because you can't legally relocate wildlife. That there's a law that says you can't, and so particularly endangered species. So I called one of my friends who's a conservation officer in a panic, and I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? And he says, oh, for heaven's sakes, relocate the snakes, because if you don't, they're all going to get killed. So I found the closest fenced row where there was lots of down trees, snakes like going underneath down trees, and I released my 27 milk snakes there. So long story short, if a snake is in harm's way, it just needs a hand and moved somewhere safe so it doesn't get hit over the head with a shovel. Questions?
Yes, we've got two. So the first one is, are bird feeders being discouraged because of avian flu?
Yes and no. So during migration, I would definitely not have bird feeders up. Right now, the cases of avian influenza are on the downslide. So we do have our bird feeder up now, but as soon as spring comes, we'll be taking them down again because I know there'll be an influx of avian influenza. So keep an eye on what's going on with it. None of the birds that visit your bird feeder are high-risk species, but of course they are birds, so they can still, get it, carry it, and transmit it. So, if it's outside of migration season, it's reasonably safe. But if you are filling your bird feeders and cleaning your bird feeders, which you should be doing, make sure you wear gloves.
Perfect. And then Deborah is wondering what's the best way to contact your center in case of an emergency?
So we are open 8 to 6 on weekdays, 8 to 5 on weekends. Calling is always your best bet. But we work with, like I mentioned before, and I think it's at our 18, 19, 20 different SPCAs and humane societies between London, Oakville, Guelph, and Niagara. And all those offer 24-hour service. So the officers have ways of contacting us after hours. We don't answer the phone after hours just because there's only one of me and my husband, and occasionally we need to like sleep and eat and stuff. But if there is an emergency that requires our expertise, then the SPCA officer or Humane Society officer or animal control officer will be able to get a hold of us. So during the day, you can call us. After hours, contact your local SPCA or Humane Society. All right, any more?
Nope, that's all for now. Thank you.
All right. We're quickly going to talk about waterfowl and lead. So for the last 10 or so years, we've no longer allowed hunting of waterfowl with lead. Unfortunately, some people still do. So this may be slightly gruesome, but you see on X-ray, you see that tiny, 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 tiny little pellet of lead in the goose. Where it was located, it could not surgically be removed. That pellet of lead caused that goose to have very bad lead poisoning, so we had to humanely euthanize it. And my calipers, you can see this is just that tiny, tiny pellet of lead caused that goose to die. The other ways we see lead poisoning is historically present lead. So certain areas have been, for eons, very popular waterfowl hunting locations. All that lead that they used before 10 years ago sunk to the bottom and is still there. That's why it's such a common occurrence for swans to get lead poisoning, because swans have the long necks. They go down and they root around in the sediment, and then they unearth these lead pellets and end up ingesting them, and it's causes their demise. Also, we're seeing a lot of lead in scavengers because we still allow lead ammunition for the hunting of terrestrial animals. So during the controlled deer hunt, we see a lot of lead poisoning of scavengers, including golden and bald eagles. So hunters, they shoot, they're trained to shoot sort of center mass. So they shoot, they use exploding ammunition that explodes on impact. Then they field dress the deer, remove the gut and the internal organs, and then they leave that as a present to wildlife, which is fantastic because those guts are all full of lead particles, And eagles are very eager scavengers. They're lazy hunters, and they end up ingesting those lead pellets, and then it causes them to die. So if we can locate the lead and remove the lead, we can attempt to chelate the lead that is flowing through the blood system with drugs. So if we can do that, that's great. In the case of this goose, we could not do that because of the location of the pellet, and if we surgically incised those muscles, they would never quite heal and the goose would never fly again. So those were some considerations for that goose. Injured wildlife. It is important that wildlife that is injured gets professional help as soon as possible. Pain management is absolutely crucial. And if the injuries are so bad that the animal cannot recover, the sooner we can euthanize them, the better, the less the animal suffers. If you get hit by a truck, they give you on the ambulance, they give you usually something like morphine right away. Pain management is very, very much important. Whenever you are dealing with injured wildlife, please remember, sound, smell, sight, touch is stressful to wildlife. We are scary to them. Never, ever do we make wildlife comfortable. If they are freezing in place, they are freezing in place and they are totally freaking out in their mind. We are scary to them. So, if you have them contained, if you cover whatever the container is with a towel, make it dark. If you are transporting them in a car, don't have your radio on, don't have loud conversations, because it just reduces their stress. Stress is never great when you're trying to heal from injuries. Less stress is always better. Keep in mind that if it's been in a cat's mouth, outdoor cats, it's going to need antibiotics. Cats carry a Pasteurella bacteria in their mouth, and the Pasteurella bacteria are super lethal to wildlife. They are enough to bring like a bull down. If a cottontail has been in a cat's mouth or a bird has been in a cat's mouth, even if there is no broken skin, there's no punctures, the animal in question, cottontail, the bird, whatever, is going to either preen or groom themselves, they're going to ingest that saliva, and they're still going to end up with a Pasteurella infection after the fact. So just a couple of things to keep in mind. I see we have some questions.
Yes, Stefan is just wondering about the public visiting your facility and if you have recommendations of places to observe wildlife, such as parks or trails.
Our facility is 100% absolutely closed to visitors. That's a legal requirement for being a wildlife custodian. No wildlife custodian can have people visit the wildlife that they have in care. Practically speaking, even if that wasn't the law, I could lose my authorization as a result. Even if that wasn't the case, the animals that we have in care are all wild and need to return to the wild. So there's no benefit to the animal from humans visiting. And as a wildlife custodian, it's my job to always think what is in the best interest of the wildlife that I have in my care. And so humans unfortunately don't matter that much. So there's no benefit to the wildlife from people visiting. We are working on, once our new wildlife hospital is built, we will have a education room, and so we do hope to have some public education sessions there, and as well as we're working on a wetland and forest restoration project on our property. And so we are hoping in due time that we'll be able to have that those areas open for small guided tours as well. But we're at this point not there yet. Observing wildlife, man, we are so lucky. We live between two amazing Great Lakes, shores of Lake Ontario, shores of Lake Erie, loaded with waterfowl right now. Pair of binoculars go a long way. Eagles are soaring and birds are flying. Long Point right now is amazing. We went to Long Point 2 weeks ago on the weekend and observed thousands of sandhill cranes, as well as countless species of waterfowl. So those are some great locations. Your friendly neighbor farm field without trespassing, so do it from the road. There's turkeys and deer and all sorts of wildlife. Soon there'll be like a place like Ruthven Park. They put on owl prowls, so you can go out a guided tour at night and see and hear owls. So those are some of the ideas I would have. Any other questions?
Not from the chat, but Chantal, would you be able to talk a little bit about baiting? Because I know that's something that we had previous presenter talking about, how people put out food or whatnot to try to attract wildlife, or going out specifically looking if you find it where an owl nests, for example, and how that can sort of be disruptive to.
Yeah, we always have to keep that in mind. So the rule of thumb is if you see a wild animal and it looks at you, you have now invaded its personal space. You are too close. You have now interrupted its wild life. And so you're too close. I really think people need to use a lot of common sense. Just because you know that there's an owl nesting there, observe from a distance. 500mm lenses are 500mm lenses for a reason. That means that you can stand like a long distance away and observe or take pictures of these animals. Again, if the animal is looking at you, you are too close, you are now an invasive. Baiting is, I never support baiting for any way, shape, or form other than if you have a bird feeder in your yard. Bird feeders are pretty innocuous, and it doesn't really alter the, research has shown it doesn't really alter the natural way birds live. But for birds of prey, particularly, it can cause them to abandon nests. Would you really want to be responsible for that? Is it really that important? Myself, I am a keen wildlife observer, but I like to observe wildlife incidentally. I do not care to travel to locations where there is a specific, rare bird or something like that and stand around with 150 of my new best friends interfering with this animal's life. There's tons of things that have happened over the years. Point Peely, hundreds and hundreds of people sit around and watch the wood stork die. Crested caracara, that was a vagrant in the, so a bird that isn't necessarily belong here. Crested caracara, same thing. We've all harassed them as much till it died. We need to use common sense. Snowy owls, they like to spend lots of time on the ground. If you see one, think how lucky you are, move on, leave the animal alone. So common sense. All right, any more questions?
Again, just another one from me. A lot of our area is now being developed a bit more, so we are seeing some of these natural areas disturbed. I know locally we've got like coyote populations that are being displaced by developments. Do you have any sort of advice to anyone on that, especially as we're sort of sharing more common areas with some of our wilderness neighbors?
Oh, we're back to that good old fashioned common sense. I get some coyotes being a big and ready thing. They're mating now, so they're a little bit more active now than they were. Soon they're going to be having babies, so they're going to be a little bit more vigilant than they were. If you know that there's coyotes active in an area, stay away from it. Just because you normally always walk there, go walk somewhere else and let them do their thing. If you're worried about your dog, so I live very rurally. We live very rurally, and we basically live in the forest. We also have some pet Nigerian dwarf goats, who obviously are like snack size for the coyotes. Plus we have dogs and cats. So our cats are indoor cats. Our dogs are on leashes when they're outside, particularly at night when it's dark, because they're more risk. So instead of putting your dog out in the backyard, go out with your dog and have your dog outside supervised, because you know that there's coyotes in the area. It's all common sense and being smart. Our goats are safe because we also have a standard donkey, who is our coyote deterrent and livestock guardian. Works like a charm. Coyotes won't go within a mile of that donkey because the donkey will kill them. So there's all these common sense things attached and associated with it. If you feed cats outside, please stop it, because you're attracting all sorts of wildlife to your yard, including coyotes. It's just just using common sense, I think, will alleviate a lot of these problems. Put your garbage away, no food, no shelter, no wildlife. So, it just means that you might have to alter your behavior a little bit. And I think that's what the rub is. A lot of people don't want to. Well, I've always, left my barbecue dirty. Well, okay, but now it's causing a problem. I've always had my garbage out here. Okay, but it's causing a problem. So yeah, we don't want to make changes. I'm originally from Holland, and I'm watching right now because there hasn't been wolves in Holland for many, many years. And now wolves have naturally come back to naturalized areas in Holland, and they're killing sheep. And so farmers are outraged, and the wolves have to go. No, the farmers have to manage their sheep. It's just because they've never had to do it within their lifetime. They don't want to. So it's making some changes to your own behavior that will alleviate some of these issues. All right, any other questions?
That's all I'm seeing. Oh, we just had one pop in. So there is this from Deborah. She has a resident skunk in her yard.
Yeah.
That's under her garden shed, and she's happy to have it there. But when she needs to use her shed and she's concerned that it may have babies, how should she handle that situation?
So skunks are very good diggers. They're also they're in the grander scheme of things, they're pretty benign unless you happen to have a dog. As long as if the skunk is out and about, as long as you don't move fast, the skunk will not bother you because they don't see very well. So it's very easy to scare a skunk by moving fast. So if you move slow and the skunk knows you're there, it will naturally move away from you. They would rather not spray because it takes a lot of energy for them to spray. So if they can avoid it, they will. If you have a skunk living under a shed, chances are good it will have babies. Not right now, but it will. In another month or so, we'll have babies under the shed. Similar to the bats, if you know the skunk is not home and it does not have babies underneath there, as in it's too early or the wrong time of year, evict the skunk and then dig in some mesh, because of course they dig. So if you just block the exit, they will just dig underneath it. So you have to have some mesh that you dig in, and then the skunk will move on to a different area. It's always better to deter wildlife that you don't want in your yard from being there than to forcefully remove it. So that would be my advice.
Okay, and sorry, just to so I guess they have to move the shed, so they're worried about disturbing a nest or disturbing. Is March sort of a mating time or a
Yeah, March is early enough.
okay
Unless we keep having this really weird and wacky warm weather, March should be okay for moving the shed.
Wonderful. So if anyone has any other questions, please do drop them in the chat. Thank you so much, Chantal, for taking the time to walk us through the various ways of helping.
Oh, I'm not done yet. There's
sorry.
more.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh.
No. I'm nearing the end, but I'm not quite there yet.
Yes, sorry. Carry on. Sorry.
Containing an injured animal. Make sure that you have a plan, and make sure that whoever is around you is aware of your plan. Make sure that you have appropriate protective gear to protect yourself from, wildlife weapons as well as zoonotic diseases. If you don't have appropriate gear, don't go there. Make sure that you're quick. If you're going to pick up a snapping turtle and you're resolved to do it. If you hesitate, you will get nailed. Be quiet, make it dark, make sure that whatever you transport the animal in is species appropriate. And again, don't feed the animal. Wildlife and the law. So the Animal Welfare Act does apply to wildlife as well. That means you cannot perpetrate cruelty to wildlife. Fish and Wildlife Act is enforced by the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. It governs most wildlife. Then there's the Endangered Species Act, so that gives an extra degree of protection to these animals that are listed there, which is enforced by the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. Migratory Bird Conservation Act is a federal act, and it is enforced by the Canadian Wildlife Services and that's a division of Environment Canada and Climate Change. And then the Wild Animal and Plant Protection Regulation of International and Interprovincial Trade Act, WPRITA for short, is also a federal act. It's what they use at the border. So Canada is one of the signers of CITES, and 70 odd countries have signed treaties that basically means you can't import rhino horns or stuff like that from endangered species. And so that act takes care of the border. So our federal wildlife officers hang out at the border and prevent the in and export of things that cannot be in and exported. I condensed the 150 pages of the Fish and Wildlife Act into 3 things. You cannot be in possession of wildlife, you cannot relocate wildlife, and it's illegal to harass wildlife. If your dog chases wildlife, it also falls under harassment. If you find sick or injured wildlife, you have 24 hours to get it help. After that, it becomes an offense under the law. And that is actually an automatic court date. And you can, if you get caught, and just because you mean well, doesn't actually change the law. So people say, oh, I had no intention of keeping it, but it does not, you know, it's like speeding with your car. My public servants announcement, they usually are a little offensive to some people, but I continue to make them anyways. Google does not have the answers. Do-it-yourself wildlife rehabilitation is self-serving and never in the best interest of the animal. Polysporin does not fix broken bones. That's my metaphor for some of the weird things people try to use to fix wildlife. I have spent hours scraping polysporin out of open fractures. Puppy milk replacer is for puppies. Kitten milk replacer is for kittens. It's not for wildlife babies. Raising orphan wildlife at home illegally is not a good learning experience for your children. Wildlife in distress does not belong on social media. And if you contract rabies and have rabies symptoms, you will die. Things to keep in your car. And how you can help wildlife. So stop sharing, liking, commenting on social media posts that involve wildlife in non-wild or invasive ways. Be an advocate for wild living wildlife and help educate others. In your backyard, please plant native species of plants and flowers. So support habitat restoration and protection. Be respectful of the personal space of wildlife. We talked about that. If you are observing wildlife and it looks at you, you have now invaded its space. Fish and hunt let free and clean up after yourself so that I don't have to catch skunks and remove ice cat lips from skunks. So basically be an advocate and help educate people. And my favorite saying, when we return wildlife to the wild, we merely return them to what is already theirs. For men cannot give wild animals freedom, they can only take it away. With that, I finish and I will answer any questions.
Yeah, so we do have one question from Faye, and she's asking about why she's never seen anyone out enforcing these wildlife laws that you referenced, and where can she find them? And like, I guess, how would you say if you saw something, how would you maybe report that, or what is your course?
The Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry has a tips line, and you call it in, a live person answers your phone, and then a conservation officer calls you back. There is conservation officers and federal wildlife officers out and about. Unfortunately, because we keep cutting budgets, there isn't nearly as many of them as there should be, and they are in short supply. They do the very, 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 very best they can, but they are spread quite thinly. And so that's a problem. However, OPP can also enforce federal wildlife, or excuse me, provincial wildlife laws. So OPP can lay charges if they so wish. But calling, if you see a wildlife related offense, call the Ministry of Natural Resources tips line. I think it is actually, it's MNR tips is the acronym for it. So if you dial 1888 MNR tips, you get the MNR tips line.
Perfect. Well, Deborah says very informative. Thank you, and lots of accolades coming in. So thank you again, Chantal, for taking the time to walk us through some really practical hands-on information. As Chantal said, make sure you do your research. Like we say in the library worlds too, Google is not necessarily your friend. Chantal, if you have any resources you'd like to share, I'm happy to email those out, or any places where people can, find really good message.
Our website, and if anybody has any questions or whatever, always feel free to email me. I try to get back to people. If it's more urgent, I'll get back a little bit quicker, but I try to get back to everyone when they do send out emails. Again, Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry governs most Wildlife, and except migratory birds, those are federally protected, so that would be Canadian Wildlife Services. They also have good resources available. And Canadian Wildlife Health Cooperative is the agency that monitors wildlife health. So if you see sick or dead or a lot of dead birds somewhere, contact them and they'll send somebody out to sample that. Other than that, I don't know.
No, thank you for all those resources. And as I said, the website's a great spot. I will share that tomorrow.
Okay.
Also, as you said, you are a volunteer-driven organization. I know you were always looking for support, so there's also some great information about supporting Hobbitstee on that website, which I encourage everyone to again visit and to get your information. And Chantal's an excellent resource. Also great to know about that sort of network of SPCAs and whatnot, because I know it's a very large province and we've got people coming from various areas. So thank you again for joining us tonight. Any feedback on this presentation or ideas you'd like to see at the library are welcome, whether you're local to the Niagara area or whatnot. If not, reach out to your own local library. They're pretty cool places where we get to do fun things like this to build stronger communities and healthy places that we can all call home. So thank you again, Chantal and everyone. We are going to log off now because it's almost 8 o'clock. But I hope everyone has a good night and it's not too windy for you. And look for that follow-up email, which will include the recording as well tomorrow.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Take care.